Diana received dozens of letters from Prince Philip. She kept one locked in a safe deposit box with instructions, "Only open if something happens to me." The letter revealed the royal family's real plan for Diana, and it wasn't retirement, it was erasure. May 1992, Kensington Palace. Princess Diana held a cream-colored envelope bearing Buckingham Palace's crest. She had received many letters from Prince Philip over the years, but something about this one felt different. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was typed on official stationery with a handwritten postscript. With each sentence, her blood ran colder. The official version, eventually leaked to biographers, spoke of Philip's disappointment, his hope for reconciliation, his concern for William and Harry. Those excerpts would paint him as a reasonable mediator, but Diana held the complete letter, and it said something entirely different. "You have made your position quite clear," Philip had written. "However, you must understand that the institution is larger than any individual. Your cooperation in managing this situation appropriately is not optional. There are acceptable ways forward, and there are consequences for choosing unacceptable paths." Diana read that paragraph 3 times. The word consequences seemed to pulse on the page. The letter continued, "Your son's futures depend entirely on decisions made in the coming months. Their positions, their security, their relationship with their heritage, all of this can be preserved or dramatically altered based on your choices. I trust you understand what I'm saying." Diana felt sick. This wasn't fatherly advice. This was a threat about her children. But the most chilling part came in the handwritten postscript. Some members of this family have learned to accept their reduced circumstances gracefully. Others have found that resistance leads to isolation, poverty, and irrelevance. I hope you will be wise enough to choose the former path. The alternative would be most unfortunate for everyone involved, particularly the boys. P. Diana set the letter down with shaking hands. She walked to the window, looking out at the palace gardens where William and Harry were playing with their nanny. They were laughing, carefree, innocent of the threats being made against their mother in official palace correspondence. For several minutes, Diana simply stood there, processing what she had read. Prince Philip hadn't written to mediate or counsel. He had written to threaten her into compliance. The message was clear: cooperate with whatever the royal family decided for her future, or face consequences that would affect her children. Diana returned to her desk and read the letter once more, this time analyzing every word with the careful attention it deserved. Acceptable ways forward, meaning ways that serve the institution's interests, not hers. Consequences, unspecified but ominous. Their positions can be altered. A direct threat about William and Harry's royal status. Reduce circumstances gracefully. Other royals who had been pushed aside and forced to accept it. Resistance leads to isolation, poverty, and irrelevance. A promise of what would happen if she fought back. This wasn't a letter, it was a blueprint for her destruction if she didn't comply. Diana carefully placed the letter back in its envelope. Her first instinct was to call her lawyer, Victor Mishcon. Her second instinct was to show it to someone in the media. Her third instinct was to confront Charles directly. She did none of these things. Instead, Diana walked to her private safe, a small concealed vault behind a panel in her dressing room, and locked the letter inside. Something told her that this letter was too dangerous to share immediately. It was evidence, certainly, but evidence of what? Royal intimidation? Threats against a princess? Who would believe her? The palace had perfected the art of plausible deniability. They could claim Philip was simply being direct, that she was overreacting, that she was being hysterical. They had already successfully painted her as emotionally unstable in private briefings to select journalists. This letter, shown at the wrong time to the wrong people, could be used against her rather than protecting her. So Diana waited, and watched, and began documenting everything. Over the following months, Diana noticed patterns. Palace staff became distant. Security protocols tightened. Her royal access was quietly limited. Other family members showed unusual interest in her activities. Princess Anne asking about charity work, Prince Edward inquiring about travel plans, even the Queen Mother's secretary calling with oddly specific questions. They were watching her, monitoring her, waiting to see if she would comply or resist. Diana continued her public duties while quietly building her own network outside the palace. She kept detailed notes, recorded certain calls, made copies of important documents, and Philip's letter remained locked in her safe, waiting. The right moment came in 1995, 3 years after she received the letter. Diana had agreed to do a secret interview with Martin Bashir for Panorama, a decision that would shock the palace and change her life forever. But before that interview aired, she needed to ensure she had protection. Diana called Victor Mishkon, her trusted solicitor, and scheduled a private meeting at his office. Victor had represented her with absolute discretion and loyalty throughout the divorce proceedings. If anyone could advise her on the letter, it was him. "Victor," Diana said as she sat across from him in his wood-paneled office, "I need to show you something I've kept hidden for 3 years. After you read it, you'll understand why." She handed him the envelope. Victor adjusted his reading glasses and began reading. Diana watched his expression change from professional interest to barely concealed shock. "Your Royal Highness," Victor said carefully when he finished, "this is extraordinary. This is evidence of intimidation, possibly coercion. The threats regarding your son's futures are particularly troubling. Can I use it?" Diana asked. "Can I show this to people?" Victor was quiet for a long moment, considering. "You can, you should, but we must be strategic about how and when. The palace will claim it's being taken out of context. They'll say Prince Philip was trying to be helpful, that his language was simply direct rather than threatening. They'll make you look paranoid for interpreting it this way." "But you see the threats?" Diana pressed. "You see what he's really saying." "I absolutely do," Victor confirmed. "Any reasonable person reading this would see it as threatening, but the palace has resources we don't. Sympathetic journalists, historians, commentators who will spin this their way. We need to be prepared for that." Diana nodded slowly. "What do you suggest?" "Make copies. Store them in multiple secure locations. Create a detailed memorandum explaining the context. When you received it, how it made you feel, what happened after you received it. Document everything related to this letter. Then, when the time is right, we release everything at once. Not just the letter, but the full story." Over the next several weeks, Diana did exactly that. She made multiple copies of the letter, storing them in different safe deposit boxes across London. She wrote a detailed memorandum explaining the circumstances under which she received it and the threats she interpreted from its contents. She documented subsequent events that seemed connected to the letter's warnings. She also did something else. She began quietly sharing the letter's existence with a small circle of trusted friends, without showing them the actual content. Rosa Monckton, her close friend and confidant, was one of the first people Diana told. "Rosa," Diana said during a private lunch, "I need to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone else yet. I received a letter from Prince Philip years ago. It wasn't advice, it was threats. Direct threats about what would happen to me and my sons if I didn't cooperate with whatever the palace wanted." Rosa set down her teacup carefully. "Diana, do you still have this letter?" "I have it secured in multiple locations. I have copies. I have documentation. But I'm telling you this because if something happens to me, I need people to know this letter exists." "What do you mean, if something happens to you?" Rosa asked, alarm creeping into her voice. Diana looked at her friend directly. "I'm being isolated, Rosa, systematically pushed aside. My movements are monitored. My phone calls are listened to. My staff are questioned about my activities. The letter said there would be consequences if I didn't comply. I think those consequences have already begun." Rosa reached across the table and took Diana's hand. "Then you need to go public with this. Show the world what they're doing to you." "I will," Diana promised, "when the time is right. But first, I need to make sure that if anything happens to me, the truth comes out anyway." Diana began leaving sealed envelopes with trusted friends and advisors, each containing a copy of the letter and instructions. "Only open if something happens to me." She also prepared a statement to be released posthumously if necessary, explaining everything she had experienced since receiving Philip's letter. The Panorama interview, when it finally aired in November 1995, sent shockwaves through the British establishment. Diana's candid discussion of her marriage, her struggles, and her desire to be a queen in people's hearts was unprecedented. The palace was furious, but Diana didn't mention the letter during that interview. She was saving it. What she didn't know was that the palace had learned about the letter's existence. Someone in her circle, she never found out who, had mentioned it to someone else, and word had reached Buckingham Palace that Diana was holding evidence of Philip's threats. The response was swift and calculated. In early 1996, the Queen wrote to both Charles and Diana, informing them that divorce was now inevitable and should proceed quickly. The timeline was suddenly accelerated. Negotiations that Diana's lawyers had expected to take years were compressed into months. Diana understood what was happening. They were rushing the divorce before she could use the letter as leverage. They wanted to control the narrative and the terms before she revealed what Philip had written. But Diana had learned to play the long game. She agreed to the accelerated timeline, negotiated the best terms she could, and accepted the divorce settlement in August 1996. Throughout the negotiations, she never once mentioned Philip's letter. The palace likely assumed she had decided not to use it, that she had accepted her reduced circumstances gracefully, as Philip had suggested. They were wrong. Diana was simply waiting for the right moment. And that moment came in early 1997, when she began planning to give another major interview, this time to an American network, where she would have more control over the content and less interference from the British establishment. In preparation for this interview, Diana finally showed Philip's letter to Michael Gibbons, her personal accountant and financial advisor. Michael had been helping Diana establish financial independence after the divorce, and she trusted him completely. "Michael," Diana said, as they met in her private sitting room at Kensington Palace, "I need you to see something, and I need you to understand why I've been so determined to establish financial security independent from the royal family." She handed him the letter. Michael read it carefully, his professional composure barely concealing his shock. "Your Royal Highness, this is evidence of financial coercion in addition to the emotional threats. He's explicitly warning you about poverty and reduced circumstances if you don't comply. This could be relevant to your divorce settlement negotiations, even now." "I know," Diana said, "but I've decided something. I'm not going to use this letter to renegotiate the divorce. I'm going to use it to show the world what this family is really like, how they treat people who don't obey, how they use threats and intimidation to maintain control." Michael looked concerned. "That's a significant decision, Your Royal Highness. Are you prepared for the backlash?" "I've been living with backlash for 15 years, Diana replied. "At least this time it will be based on truth rather than their carefully constructed lies about me." But Diana never got the chance to reveal the letter publicly. She died in Paris on August 31st, 1997, just weeks after making this decision. The sealed envelopes Diana had left with trusted friends were opened. The letter was read by multiple people who Diana had trusted to tell her story if she couldn't tell it herself. Victor Mishcon prepared a detailed note about the letter for potential future use. Rosa Monckton wrote about it in her private diary. Michael Gibbons secured his copy in a vault at Coutts Bank, with specific instructions about when and how it should be released. But publicly, Philip's letter remained largely unknown. Parts of his correspondence with Diana were eventually made public, the carefully edited parts that made him look reasonable and concerned. The threatening letter, with its talk of consequences and reduced circumstances and altered positions for her sons, remained hidden from public view. Some people knew about it. Diana's close friends whispered about the Philip letter that revealed the family's true nature. Journalists heard rumors about threatening correspondence but could never get confirmation or access to the actual document. Biographers noted that there was more to the Philip letters than has been revealed, but couldn't provide specifics. The letter existed in a strange limbo, known to exist by a select few, but never fully exposed to public scrutiny. Years after Diana's death, Prince William and Prince Harry were approached by several of their mother's former advisors, who asked if they wanted to see certain documents Diana had left behind. Among these documents was Philip's letter. Both princes read it. Both were devastated by what their grandfather had written to their mother. The threats, the intimidation, the cold calculation of consequences for non-compliance, all of it was there in Philip's own words. But William and Harry faced an impossible choice. Do they expose this letter and potentially destroy their grandfather's reputation? Do they confirm what many suspected, that their mother had been threatened and intimidated by her own family? Or do they protect the institution, maintain family unity, and keep their mother's evidence of abuse hidden? They chose silence. Not because they didn't believe their mother or because they thought Philip was right. They chose silence because they understood that revealing the letter wouldn't bring their mother back, and it would only create more pain for everyone involved. But they never forgot what they read. And it fundamentally changed how they understood their mother's struggles, her fears, and her determination to establish independence from the family that had threatened her. The letter also influenced how both William and Harry would later interact with the palace system. William became determined to protect his wife Catherine from similar treatment, insisting on clear boundaries and better support structures. Harry would eventually make the radical decision to leave the royal family entirely, citing concerns about history repeating itself with his wife, Meghan. Both princes understood that their mother's warnings in Philip's letter about resistance leading to isolation, about consequences for non-compliance, about acceptable and unacceptable paths, were not empty threats. They were descriptions of how the system actually worked. Their mother had lived through those consequences. Harry decided he and Meghan wouldn't. Prince Philip died in April 2021. Official tributes praised his service, his modernization of the monarchy, his dedication to duty. Very few mentioned the letters to Diana, and even fewer knew about the threatening one. But the letter still exists. Multiple copies, stored in multiple locations known to multiple people. It remains one of the most significant pieces of evidence of how the royal family operated behind closed doors, not with gentle concern, but with calculated threats and institutional intimidation. Diana never revealed it herself, but she ensured the truth would survive her, waiting for a time when it might be safe to acknowledge that her fears about the family's power and willingness to use it had been entirely justified. The palace's carefully crafted narrative about Philip's supportive correspondence with Diana remains the official version of events. But those who have read the actual letter, the complete letter, not the sanitized excerpts, know a very different truth. They know that when Diana said she felt threatened by the royal family, she wasn't being paranoid or hysterical. She was being accurate, and they know that the evidence of those threats, written in Prince Philip's own words on official palace stationery, exists to this day, locked away but not forgotten, a testament to one woman's determination to document the truth, even when she knew that truth might be too dangerous to reveal in her lifetime. The letter that Diana kept hidden for 5 years, that she locked away with instructions to only open if something happens to me, revealed exactly what she always said it did. That the royal family's real plan for her wasn't retirement or quiet dignity. It was erasure. Complete, systematic, institutional, erasure of everything she represented and everything she might become without their control. And Diana's decision to document it, copy it, and secure it in multiple locations ensured that even if they could erase her, they couldn't erase the evidence of what they had tried to do to her,